You probably won't be able to see the finer details of this artwork, but I will bring it closer to the camera a little bit later, or possibly take a photograph of it to be included in the brief. I'm going to talk through a couple of things. I talked about problems. I could have also talked about challenges, which is probably a more positive word. But one way or the other, I do mean it positively, because it's kind of like, how do we think out of the box to integrate an artwork? So here is my artwork. It's upside down for me, the right way around for you, and I'm going to work on it a bit upside down. And I've chosen different things. So I've chosen a simple hatching technique for the actual fur of the leopard. And I started off with a simple yellow color, as you can see. Very simple. So it's kind of more interesting than just coloring in flat areas of shaded color, which can look quite magical and Disney-like, but not necessarily that exciting. And I then went into the yellow and I brought in some orange, just to make it a little bit more interesting instead of that plain yellow color. Okay, and in the shaded areas, I've been bringing in the places where there would be more of a shadow. I've been bringing in some brown. So I've taken kind of a yellow, orange and brown and imagining them as being related to each other. They're all warm colors and they speak to each other easily. They create a harmony. So that's how I went about, or how I'm going about the fur. And of course I'm going to move onto my leopard from the one side to the other. That's how I've been working. I chose a flat color for the sky, and the reason for this is the rest of it is so textured that I thought the artwork could do with a certain flat part. And of course shading takes time, and it really is about just being patient, doing lighter areas first. And the way I shade is by keeping my pencil sharp and going over the same area in several directions until it looks as flat as possible. I still haven't decided if I'm going to bring in a darker blue just around the edge later on to create a bit of contrast. The leaves, I have started with a darker green, and I've brought in fact, I've used the 3 greens for the leaves, and I'm basically just working with lines, kind of striations to start with. I started with a darker color, but you could start with a lighter color. It's often easier. But you can go backwards and forwards. Yeah, just to mention, I've had a terrible problem with my pencil crayons. If you drop them, they break, the leads break. And so I've been sharpening and sharpening. But please encourage learners to try not to drop their pencil crayons, otherwise they're going to have problems later on. And I may, just for a little bit of extra contrast, I may bring in even some yellow into the leaves as highlights. Oh, I am bringing it in rather than I may bring it in. I am bringing it in. And even bringing in a darker blue or a purple into the darkest area of shadow. So basically I and the learners will be experimenting by bringing in different colors into their shaded parts rather than just green. And that way it starts to get a feeling of being alive. If I look at my border here, my decorative border with the footprint, I'm not that happy with it because I feel there needs to be more contrast between what's going on here with the fur and the border. And the border is still a little bit weak, I feel, for this intensity. So I'm probably going to be working further into it. I'm going to spend a bit more time on my border. I'm going to keep orange as the primary color. So what I did is I initially started with stippling, little dots, and then I started coloring over the stippling, but I'm going backwards and forwards, and I'm going to create something where the outside kind of matches the intensity of the inside. And next week I might be pulling in a bit of a line as a border. I also tried a little bit of purple in terms of the deepest colors, which is quite an unusual color to use with yellows and oranges, but I'm trying it. I haven't done purple in this combo before, just to create a kind of an edge. So all the time I'm kind of trying, and many artists will call it art as being a lost and found experience. So you kind of lose something and then you bring something else back and then you refine something. And so we're going backwards and forwards, working with contrast of texture so that you can see the difference, stippling and hatching. And here I even used some cross hatching. And with the feet I used some scribbling. So we've got contrast of texture. In other words, they're different to each other. And contrast of tonal contrast, the darker areas and the lighter areas. And so slowly I'm going to be working with this piece over the next week to complete it. I'd like to encourage you to keep experimenting as you're going along. I'm still not quite sure how I'm going to do the outside, and I'm quite excited to see how I pull it together, whether I use a darker blue, a lighter blue, or perhaps another color altogether. So I am looking forward to seeing you again next week, and I hope that you have a lot of fun. Keep it alive, keep it moving, keep it changing, and we will meet back with our animals next week when we will be completing and integrating the artwork, focusing mainly on further contrast and possibly some line and detail.